Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update on West Red Lake Gold Mines, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker WRLG, and on the OTCQB under the ticker WRLGF. And we're joined today with the Vice President of Exploration at West Red Lake Gold Mines, Will Robinson. And Will, always great to get you on the show because you have a wealth of knowledge that your team is working on as far as all the different drill targets, all the work you're doing to de-risk the upcoming launch of the Madsen Mine into production in the West Red Lake District of Ontario next year. And you've been busy basically drilling out, doing a lot of definition drilling and infill drilling to gain those high confidence ounces. And so, I guess just from a quick snapshot of what the team has been working on underground, you've been drilling a lot at the Austin Main, Austin South, Austin North, even in the McVeigh zone. Just to make sure you got your ducks in a row for the restart next year, walk us through the update that came out on October 31st, where you've really kind of masked up a lot of runway here in front of the relaunch.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Shad. The definition drilling program has been very successful for us. We've drilled almost 50,000 meters, since October of last year. We added the second drill in April of this year, and the team has just been doing a great job being very efficient with the drill bit. We set ourselves a goal, to have about 55,000 ounces of high confidence inventory defined before the end of 2024. And that was basically, in line with about 1 year's worth of runway right ahead of us of the high confidence ounces. By the end of October, just on in our internal books there, we had about 100,000 ounces of that high confidence inventory defined. And so way ahead of the mark that we had set for ourselves. And I guess that just speaks to, the effectiveness of the drill program and how efficiently we've been able to drill off the deposit.
Well, there's also been a little bit of a grumbling in the market lately because the decision was made to push the PFS, the pre-feasibility study, back a little bit. But there's a method behind the madness here, and there's a reason why you want to take your time to get it done right. And that doesn't mean that you're stopping work or delaying work on the ground. So maybe just speak to how busy the team actually is and the decision made to push the PFS back. It's really in everybody's best interest.
No, for sure. Yeah. What we saw as we were kind of getting close to the finish line on that PFS study is that there was a number of opportunities for optimization in a few areas. And so we didn't want to rush out and publish that report knowing that those opportunities existed. And so we're working through those now. And so instead of coming out with that study, here in November or in December, we pushed that out to early 2025. So in January is now when we plan to have that out. And like you said, I think the main takeaway from that is it's not postponing any of the efforts or the timeline for the actual restart. We're still well on schedule for the mid 2025 restart of the mill and be back in production by that time. But as far as the PFS goes, we just wanted to take advantage, of any opportunities that we could and make it as much of a fulsome, study as we could. And so that's why we made that decision.
Well, and I just want to bring this up because we've done this in every interview, but we continue to get similar questions that are sent in to us, Will. The biggest question being, why will this be different than the experience that Claude and Pure Gold had as operators? And I think we've reiterated this many times that you're pulling from multiple areas now, but even people that I think are fairly dialed into what your news flow has been, I still don't think they understand that the prior teams were pulling mostly from the McVeigh area when it was Pure Gold. You're going to be pulling from McVeigh a little bit, but you're also going to be pulling from Austin, South Austin, and North Austin. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't even think that North Austin's ever been mined before. So that'll have fresh ore mixed in with the remnant mining. Maybe just speak to how when you do put this back in production, you're pulling from multiple stopes, multiple areas. It's not going to be the same kind of experience that people have seen before.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the big benefits that we had, since we started drilling last October is really time. And so what we've been able to do is go into a lot of these different areas of the deposit. We're not just constrained, to McVeigh and the upper South Austin and some small portions of North Austin. We've been doing a lot of development, to get to deeper parts in the deposit. We're down to 13 level now, which is approximately 650 meters deep. And what that has allowed us to do is to get the drills into a lot of these high priority areas within, like you said, all zones of the deposit, Austin, South Austin, McVeigh, and North Austin, and do the necessary drilling in order to define ourselves a very healthy runway of high confidence ounces. As we mentioned, we've got about 100,000 ounces defined currently, and that number continues to grow. And that's something, you know, that the previous operator, Pure Gold, didn't really have. So they didn't have a lot of that cushion of this well-defined inventory sort of in the bank. And the reason why that's essential is you have to have this deposit drilled off to the tight, you know, 6 to 8 meter spacing. And then you have to generate what we call a short-term model, which is a much higher resolution model than the life of mine or MRE model. And that is then what is used by the engineers at site to then start developing the high confidence stopes, MSOs, and engineering design. And so that's really what gives us the confidence moving forward is that we have, you know, we had the time to complete all of that work and really prepare ourselves well to provide optionality and enough of that high confidence inventory to build a very robust mine plan. So that's one of the big differences.
Well, and you're not resting on your laurels as far as looking for new discoveries and exploring along with all this definition drilling, infill drilling, getting those high confidence ounces. You're also looking for new ounces. And so you had a fun press release that came out on the 21st of November. Be fun to dig into this. Now, we had talked back in September, Will, and you teased that there was 4 new targets your team wanted to go after. The upper 8 area, the MJ area, which is by Wedge, and then there was 2 targets in the North Splay, which you've now dubbed the North Venus and North Shore area. So you got these 4 different targets you've gone after, but the press release that you just put out really digs into the results that came back from the upper 8. So maybe walk us through why you targeted this area. You were sharing off Micah a story about how you felt when you pulled the drill core out, but now how you feel after the assays have come back in.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that's definitely stood out, you know, just based on the results that we've received to date is the upper 8 target. And so upper 8 was kind of a conceptual target that we put together just based on some limited historic drilling that had been completed in the area. We saw, you know, after reviewing the old core photos and logs from this area, that it had a lot of the same similarities as the 8 zone proper, which is much deeper. So 8 zone, just to remind the listeners, is about 1,300 meters deep. The upper 8 zone is actually about 300 or 350 meters deep. So it's much shallower, which allows us to drill this area off pretty effectively from surface. But we were seeing, you know, all the hallmark signatures within some of the limited drilling that we had in this area with a little bit of gold grade associated with it. But there was enough geologic evidence that kind of made this stand out as the first target we wanted to drill. So as you said, we went in there, we drilled 3 holes in and around this area, sort of using the 8 zone itself as a guide, if you will. So we wanted to kind of envision, you know, a similar oriented body of ore, which, you know, 8 zone is very discrete. It's a rod shaped feature. These are chutes, right? And so we took that to heart when we started drilling upper 8, and we wanted to keep the spacing tight within that corridor of prospectivity. And we drilled 3 holes. You know, we hit the structure where we thought we would. There was some mineralization associated with it. But then we moved on to the MJ target, which is down as part of the Wedge deposit, 2 kilometers to the southwest. But then we got the assays back for upper 8, and they were pretty impressive. So what did we get? We got 44 grams per ton over 1.3 meters in one hole, and then 20 grams over a half a meter in another hole. So nice high grade intercepts, fairly narrow, but definitely showing that there's grade potential within the upper 8 zone. And so after we got those results back, we put that drill right back at upper 8, and now we have about 17 holes into the upper 8 zone, and we've received assays for 11 holes. So this most recent update was basically just providing results from an additional, I think it was 6 or 7 holes out of this area. But again, I mean, we hit 1.5 meters at 21 grams. That intercept was actually complemented by a nice smoky gray quartz vein over half a meter that had about 30 specks of visible gold in it. And so as we continue to drill this area, we're pretty excited about what we've been seeing. And with the results we received to date, we've defined now a chute in this area that's approximately 30 meters in width and about 130 meters down plunge extent. And so that's not too dissimilar from the dimensions that we see at the 8 zone proper. I mean, at the 8 zone, it's about 30 to 50 meters wide, you know, at its thickest part. And we've got 8 zone defined for about 200 meters with a few holes down plunge of that suggests it continues at depth. But the other, you know, interesting thing relating upper 8 to 8 zone is the orientation of the chute. And so at upper 8, we're seeing this thing oriented at about 110 degrees azimuth and plunging about 40 degrees. So that would be representative of the dip on the zone. And that's almost, you know, 1-to-1 exactly what 8 zone is doing at depth. And so with those two things in mind, this gives us a lot of confidence now as we go back. We have a local geologic model put together now for upper 8 for extending that zone down plunge Hopefully it becomes something on the size and extent of 8 zone. But if you just look at it, there's a section view in the press release, this sort of long section that shows that there's about 750 meters, of extent between upper 8 and 8 zone proper. And, our working kind of geologic model in this area suggests that there could be stacked lenses, in between upper 8 and 8 zone, within that structural zone. So if that's the case, we could have multiple upper 8 like targets to define moving forward, and we really hope that's the case. So that's the next kind of step as we continue defining this area with the drill bit.
Well, Will, you were reading my mind there because my next question was going to be, what about between these two areas? Because if you've got 8 zone and upper 8, what about mid 8 or, somewhere close to 8? So there could be other areas or other pockets, other shoots like this that are these really high grade, kind of narrow, but really high grade areas where you could mass up a lot of mineralization quickly. Maybe just speak for people listening in why this is important, because what it makes me think of, Will, is what happened over when Goldcorp was running the mine next to you, the Red Lake mine, and they started hitting these really high grade, kind of distinct pockets of mineralization. And that really put Goldcorp on the map. That was when Rob McEwen was there. Now, this is run by Evolution Mining next door, but at the time when those discoveries were being made at depth, I mean, could there also be a lower 8? I mean, could there be other 8 zone lookalikes all over this land package that people just haven't realized are there yet?
No, absolutely. And that was sort of part of our sort of conceptual targeting when we were trying to generate some of these new, regional ideas like Upper 8, like some of the North Splay targets is what we recognize is there's a strong spatial association with gold mineralization and these ultramafic units within the Red Lake District and definitely on the Madsen property. And so that they're basically, search spaces or corridors of prospectivity that we want to focus on, but not only along the margins of those ultramafic units like we see at Madsen and like what we've been sort of recognizing in recent drilling at our North Shore target as well, but you also get very high grade mineralization within the ultramafic body. So that's representative of 8 zone, that's representative of this new upper 8 target, and definitely representative of the high grade zone, as you alluded to next door over at Red Lake. And so yeah, and that's kind of how we're trying to think about this, because having upper 8, this, new discovery, if you will, and now 8 zone to complement that, or vice versa. In these types of orogenic systems, that structural, pattern is very common where you can get sort of a sheeted stacked system of veins, right? Almost like a deck of cards. And so if we can define 2 or 3 more of these things in between upper 8 and 8 zone, this becomes a whole different area of resource potential that then we can focus on. And if the grades continue to show, promise and be higher grade than what the run of mill or run of mine tends to be at Madsen, that's really how you can move the needle quickly in a scenario like this. More high grade, lower tonnage, feed that to the mill to supplement the lower grade but higher tonnage material from main Madsen, and yeah, and really boost your overall production profile in the process.
Well, fingers crossed that there are more mineralized zones between upper 8 and 8 zone, but just the fact that you have this new upper 8 target that's you got 17 holes into, more holes still pending on it, is pretty exciting. Let's talk about some of the other targets. You mentioned MJ, which is by Wedge, and then there's 2 of those North Splay targets, North Venus and North Shore. Out of the work you're doing now, maybe just walk us through how that's going at those 3 other targets.
Yeah, definitely. So we've wrapped up surface drilling for the year. We actually just completed close to 12,000 meters. Both drills finished their final hole just within the last week. And so we had set out originally and drilled about 10,000 meters. So we got an extra 2,000 meters out, under budget. And so that was real great to get a few extra holes in for the season. But yeah, we drilled 6 holes down at MJ. That's also testing a similar kind of 8 zone style of mineralization within the Wedge deposit. We'll be releasing results on that at some point here in the next month or two. And then we drilled a couple of holes on our 2 kilometer out North Splay target, which is called North Venus. And that's named because we were targeting, a Madsen style of mineralization proximal to that ultramafic unit, but at that, 1 kilometer periodicity out to the northeast. And just to touch back on that again, the way that we generated those targets out to the northeast of main Madsen is that we recognized there was a spacing, a pattern that holds together quite well near Madsen, where we have the Fork deposit, then we have McVeigh, and then we have North Austin. These are all known drilled areas in the existing resource at Madsen. And what you can see is that they're slightly oblique to the main Madsen trend. and they're at about a 1 kilometer spacing from each other. And so what we did is say, well, what if we extrapolate that out to the northeast at 1 kilometer spacing and use the regional mag geophysical data set to see if there's any disruptions in the stratigraphy that might indicate additional splays. And so that's how we vectored into these two areas. And we completed the drilling out at North Venus. We had a little bit of evidence of alteration mineralization there, still waiting on assays. But the North Shore targets look visually quite encouraging. So we were seeing much broader zones of the same alteration package that we often see at the Madsen deposit. It's in a lith code that we call BSLA, which is altered basalt. And that's one of the ore codes, if you will, for the Madsen deposit. So we're still waiting on assays for that area. But just to see the extent of mineralization where we hit, 50 meters at one hole of this broad alteration style, and then up to 100 meters in another hole, directly footwall to the Venus ultramafic. So same geologic spatial association between the alteration package and the ultramafic unit was quite encouraging. So yeah, we're excited to get results back for that, but obviously the assays will tell the final tale. So
Well, and just one more for you. I know that there's also the plan to eventually drill some of the Confederation package of rocks. When is that slated for?
yeah, that's going to be a next season, kind of timeline. What we did this year in the Confederation is we went out and did a comprehensive till sampling program, covered essentially all of the surface area of the Confederation. It was the first program like it, at least from the data that we have in the database. It hadn't really, been evaluated thoroughly for exploration potential. And so we did get some interesting anomalies back from that campaign, and we'll be putting out a press release that sort of highlights some of those once we get all the trace element and ICP analysis back from that work. But those are very early stage, generative targets, and so we'll probably be looking to maybe test one or two of the best ones next year out in the Confederation.
Well, I guess just summarize for us all the drilling. You've got drills that have been turning everywhere. Like you say, you finished up that 12,000 meters at some of those four different exploration targets. You got base of till sampling. You've got drilling underground. You're working on the connection drift where you can actually drill from there. So you've got so much exploration work going on. I guess summarize for us the two areas, the building of the resources for the mine restart, and then all of these other fun targets that you have at your disposal.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to look at it. So we had the regional program at Madsen, drilled about 12,000 meters. We were focused on high grade, new discoveries, new ideas, if you will, rather than just going back and drilling some of the existing deposits that exist across the property. But as you said, the two underground drills haven't slowed down. They're going to continue to drill. They've done a great job defining that 100,000 ounce runway for us of high confidence inventory. They're going to continue drilling. Those are going to be the two drills that are really going to support, replenishment of reserves on an annual basis. It's just a typical, underground operation for a narrow vein system. But next year, as we're switching gears a little bit and getting more into the brownfield exploration near mine, we're actually going to have one of the underground drills start drilling off new exploration targets from underground. And one of those first areas, as you mentioned, is the connection drift. And so we'll be able to get into there probably as soon as February of next year. And we've already defined a couple of really good looking targets in and around the existing resource area, but areas that weren't accessible previously because drilling from surface, you would have, encumbrances with existing workings and things like that, and just not any infrastructure from underground to get in and actually drill those areas out. So the areas in between North Austin and South Austin, if you will, in the upper levels of the mine. So we're really excited to have that 1.2 kilometer sort of transect across the main deposit that then we can set a drill up along and drill off some really high priority targets from there. One of the other things that we're looking at doing is extending a drift deeper in the system down off a 13 level, which will extend far out to the northeast and give ourselves another transect, but at a deeper portion of the deposit that we can do some damage on, expanding known resource zones and then also potentially testing much deeper on the Madsen deposit. That's quite a ways further out looking, but we're trying to get ahead of ourselves with these thoughts and concepts and positioning ourselves effectively so we can continue to grow the resource out ahead of the mining. Because that's always a balancing act, an underground narrow vein high grade system is you want to always have the drilling be far enough out ahead of the mining so that you always have that nice inventory base and new targets to find to keep going and building the deposit.
Well, your team has been busy all year, Will, and I'm sure they're going to be busy again next year by the way that sounds. So we'll keep tabs on all the different exploration work going on in all the different areas, underground, at surface. And for people listening in, if they want to follow along with the news flow out of West Red Lake Gold Mines, definitely click on the link below. This takes you over to the company website, straight to the news section. You can sign up for news updates and follow along as more results come out to the market. Sounds like there's still some assays pending from some of those targets already drilled this year, so we'll keep watching for those as well. Keep us posted when more news comes out. We'll get you back on to talk exploration and looking forward to our next conversation.
Great. Thanks, Chad.